try it again. Shabbat Shalom. Vayira Yaakov vayetzer lo. Jacob sees that Esau is coming with 400 men. He is afraid and he is distressed. Rashi's famous comment, he is afraid of being killed. He is distressed that he may need to kill. A reminder of the fear that all soldiers and others in positions with weapons face, that not only are they afraid for their own lives, but also that they may need to use force and take life. But Rashi's comment is explaining the repetition of the two words. It's not explaining a more fundamental question that many of the rabbis wanted to understand, which is, why is Jacob afraid at all? God appeared to him at the ladder at Beit El in the dream and said to Jacob personally, Ushmarticha b'chol asher telech, I will protect you wherever you go. Okay, it was 20 years ago. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he wondered if it was still there. There was a lot that happened. 2 wives, 2 concubines, 11 boys, 1 girl. But remember that when Jacob is in Lavan's home, God appears to him again. And when he says that Jacob should return, Shuv el eretz moladcha, go back to the land of your birthplace, ve'eheyeh imach, I'm going to be with you. So the rabbis wonder, why is it? Yes, it's scary. Esau has 400 men, but why is he afraid? Why is he going through all of this strategic stuff? This is Jacob. Doesn't he believe? Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs wrote about this in a Devar Torah, and I want to bring you some of his teachings. Rabbi Sachs found a teaching of Rashbam, and who says essentially, Rashbam doesn't use this language, but essentially to understand what is happening in this moment, we need to understand what Robert Alter called biblical type scenes. These are scenes that repeat themselves over. You actually are probably familiar with them in the Bible. Oftentimes, a young man will meet his future wife at the well. It was a little different. Abraham sent Eliezer. Isaac wasn't there, but nevertheless, Isaac found his wife Rebekah at the well. Jacob finds Rachel at the well. Moses flees Egypt, goes and finds Zipporah at the well. These are scenes that repeat themselves, with which people who heard these stories will familiar. Oftentimes, a hero of the Jewish people, somebody important, will be born when a woman is infertile. That Sarah was infertile, that Rebekah is infertile, that Hannah is infertile and prays for a child. And there is another type scene, which is that a prophet or a hero, when given a mission, runs away. Some people, Rashbam argues that when Moses' son Gershon is attacked in some way and saved because Zipporah gives him a brit milah at this inn overnight. It's a very weird scene, but Rashbam argues that Moses, remember when God says to him, I'd like you to go and free the Jewish people from this guy named Pharaoh, Moses says, send anybody else, not me, no. Bilam is supposed to give blessings to the Jewish people. He goes to curse them, and Rashbam says, yeah, you remember he got his leg crushed when the donkey who went into the wall. He gets injured. He is punished because he is running away from his mission. The classic version of this is, I say in Professor Jack Sassen's presence, is the story of Yonah. Yonah, God says to Yonah, go, I want you to prophesy to the people of Nineveh, and Jonah runs. He goes down to the pier, he goes into the boat, he goes into the belly of the boat. There's a storm. They throw him out of the belly of the boat into the depths of the sea where he's swallowed by a fish. A whale, a big fish, a big whale. He runs away and is punished for fleeing from his mission. And according to Rashbam, what is happening in this moment, Jacob wrestles with the angel overnight and emerges injured with an injured hip because he is running away from his mission. He does not, and I'll read you according to Rabbi Sachs, this fear that he encounters is not physical fear, it is the fear that comes from the feeling of personal inadequacy. Jacob says, "Who am I to stand before my brother Esau, knowing that I will continue the covenant and he will not?" Sometimes, writes Rabbi Sachs, the greatest have the least self-confidence because they know how immense is the responsibility and how small they feel in relation to it. Courage doesn't mean having no fear. It means having fear but overcoming it. And if that's true of physical courage, it's how much more so is it true of moral and spiritual courage. And Sachs brings the beautiful passage from Marianne Williamson that many of you heard before, where she writes, our deepest fears fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, famous? Actually, who are you not to be? She writes, you are a child of God, and your playing small does not serve the world. About this passage, Sachs writes the following sentence that caught my eye. He says, I sometimes feel that consciously or subconsciously some take flight from Judaism for this very reason. Who are we to be God's witness to the world, a light unto the nations, a role model for others? Which brings me to Hanukkah. Dara Horn visited Duke a little while ago. She's the author of this book, very interesting title, People Love Dead Jews. Fascinating book that I highly commend to you. In it, she says that there are two types of anti-Semitism. There's Purim anti-Semitism. Purim anti-Semitism is fairly simple. By the way, we had a training on Thursday night with the Secure Communities Network to prepare for Purim anti-Semitism. It's when a bad person, like Haman, stands up and says, I want to kill all of the Jews. I want to kill them all. Okay? But Hanukkah anti-Semitism, says Horn, works differently. She says in the Hanukkah version of anti-Semitism, whose appearances range from the Spanish Inquisition to the Soviet regime, the goal is still to eliminate Jewish civilization, but in the Hanukkah version, this goal could theoretically be accomplished simply by destroying Jewish civilization, while leaving the warm, de-Jewed bodies of its former practitioners intact. For this reason, the Hanukkah version of anti-Semitism often employs Jews as its agents. It requires not dead Jews, but cool Jews, those willing to give up whatever specific aspect of Jewish civilization is currently uncool. We can do a thought exercise each for ourselves. What is uncool about being Jewish right now? And who is responding by saying, if we just don't do that, then we'll be accepted. She remembers hearing in Hebrew school a strange story and going back and checking it out in Heinrich Gret's opus, History of the Jews. where Gretz explained how the leaders of Judea in the story of Hanukkah demonstrated their loyalty to the occupying Hellenistic empire by building a gym and recruiting teenage athletes, only to discover that in uncovering their bodies, they could immediately be recognized as Judeans in the Olympic Games. But were they to take part in the games and expose themselves to the mockery of Greek scoffers? Even this difficulty they evaded by undergoing a painful operation, so as to disguise the fact they reversed their circumcisions. To disguise the fact that they were Jews, Derahorn writes, their Zeus-worshipping overlords were not fooled. Within a few years, the regime outlawed not only circumcision, but all Jewish religious practice, and put to death anybody who didn't comply. So the holiday of Hanukkah has, in some ways, a simple message. Don't be afraid to be uncool. Don't be afraid to be different. I'll tell you a brief story. Before I was a rabbi, I spent a year and a half working in advertising and outdoor advertising. They didn't send me just a young guy off to the big markets like New York and Los Angeles. They had more senior people for that. They sent me to Waco, Texas. And then from the big market of Waco, Texas, I traveled to the sub-markets. Who knew there were sub-markets of Waco, Texas? In Temple, Killeen. Killeen, by the way, is the home to one of the largest army bases in the United States. And I remember sitting with the owner of the billboard company, because we were responsible for purchasing ads on his billboards, sitting there over lunch. And we were looking at the menu. And I said to the waiter, I just need to find something vegetarian or fish. And the owner-operator, after I ordered, turned to me and he said, "Are you a vegetarian?" And I said, "No, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm Jewish, and I keep kosher. And so I do eat meat, but I just can't have the meat here." By the way, in Killeen, Texas, the more strange thing is being the vegetarian. Okay? If I had said to him I'm a vegetarian, he would have really looked at me. But the fact that I was Jewish and I ate meat, but it just wasn't that meat, that was fine. And why I tell you that story to point out that people think that some of these things which we do, which are different, put up barriers. If I had not ordered kosher and told him that that was why I was doing it in that moment, he would never have known that I was Jewish, and there would have been that was not a moment of division, it was a bridge. Because he doesn't meet Jewish people. And this was a chance for him to meet a real live Jew, not somebody who was in his Bible, not somebody who heard about it, was sitting right there across from him. And it became a bridge for understanding. It takes spiritual courage to embrace the mission that God has given us. It's a gift and not a burden to celebrate Hanukkah when so many people around us are celebrating Christmas. That's a gift. Because by being different, we are not claiming superiority. We are claiming our tradition, our heritage that challenges us to be a light to the world. I would conclude with Rabbi Sachs' words. He says, "Of course we feel inadequate to a great task before we undertake it. It is having the courage to undertake it that makes us great. Leaders grow by leading. Writers grow by writing. Teachers grow by teaching. It is only by overcoming our sense of inadequacy that we throw ourselves into the task and find ourselves lifted and enlarged by doing so." Shabbat Shalom.